And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. Thank you again for joining today. So, today is September the 9th, 2022. So, we're getting closer to Christmas season. So, hopefully, everyone's looking forward to that one. Hopefully, we'll have a better experience than compared to previous years in the past. Anyway, we'll be talking some interesting topics, interesting things that's been going on this past week or so. So, without further ado, let's take a look at some of the key topics. So first topic that we will be discussing is, a TV show that's been highly publicized because it's one of the most more common contents around the world. Of a known franchise, a very popular, successful film franchise, the Lord of the Rings series, which is created by Tolkien, is now made to a TV series which is owned by, or has owned the rights by Amazon. Now, question is, will it succeed? I had my apprehensions, and lucky enough, we have two big franchises that's pitting each other again in terms of your viewing preferences, and none other than the prequel to Game of Thrones, and then you have the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, from Amazon versus HBO. So we'll take a look at that one. Second, we'll be talking about in crypto news in terms of a company mistakenly sent, instead of sending the actual money, sent an exorbitant amount of money in the north of $7 million to an individual, which is a big amount. And the question is, what do you do if you were given that big amount? Do you spend it? Do you return it? And obviously, who's culpable here? Is it the fault of the person who received it, or is it the company who mistakenly sent the amount in itself? So we'll talk about that. And next is we'll be talking about the court issue with regards to Apple, not the fight with Fortnite or Epic Games, but in terms of the App Store itself, in terms of how difficult the platform is, the mere fact that they're charging 15-30% from the different developers that uses their platform in trying to monetize their app, and they cannot even guarantee the safety, or meaning fraudulent bad actors in terms of using the apps to scam out different users. So we'll talk about that as well. And next is in relation to the different apps, in terms of how games have shifted ever so slightly, but it's a concerning trend that I think many of us should be taking a closer look at this one. In terms of games, obviously, typically you purchase them a one-time deal so you can play to your heart's content, but companies are getting more greedier and greedier to the point that, which is their right, but in terms of providing value, not necessarily the case here. A good case in point is the Diablo Immortal made by Activision, which is a crummy way to incentivize players to spend, in the northwards of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, or in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. And the game is supposed to be a free to play, so there's always a catch. So not necessarily free, but they want to entice you in the initial part. So we'll talk about that. Is that beneficial for the whole industry as a whole, or should government step in and do something to regulate this? Because obviously this tactics is not necessarily ethical if you were to take a closer look. And lastly, stay tuned for the last part where we'll talk about something on a somber note. As of this recording, as mentioned, I'm sure all around the world has already heard the news of the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, one of the longest reigning monarchs of our current generation. So sad to hear about that news, but we'll be talking about on a lighter note in terms of how the Queen has impacted our society in terms of pop culture here. So stay tuned for that one. Anyway, so to begin with, as mentioned regarding Amazon purchasing the TVC, the rights to produce a TV series for the Lord of the Rings franchise, in this case, titled as Rings of Power. There has been growing concern, even I, when it was first announced, because if they were to follow the lore or how Tolkien wrote the story, similar how Peter Jackson stayed true to the story, made tons of money, millions or billions of dollars in the box office. But it took years or decades to be able to produce a high quality content like that. In this case, there have been rising concerns in terms of the content or the agenda, hidden agenda behind the producers or the studio that backed up those people who were left in charge to make the TV series. Now, take note, they've spent a lot of money acquiring the rights. I think they spend the north of hundreds of millions of dollars. I think 200 2 million or close to $300 million for the rights alone. Then obviously to be able to produce the TV series, you need to spend in terms of high production value, the CGI, the design, the aesthetics of how the world of Lord of the Rings, or in this case Rings of Power, and it's set prequel to the main film, which is the Lord of the Rings. And who was the main character here that's going to jumpstart the series is Galadriel. And sad to say, or good to know, that I haven't watched it, but based on reviews, it's somewhat mixed and very concerning in terms of shifting away from the main storyline or lore, or changing the narrative here, which they're trying to make excuses here. But at the end of the day, if people didn't like the content, then your show is going to suffer here. Now, on this case, we're going to take a closer look at the company Amazon here. Investing a lot of money, obviously you expect to benefit and reap the rewards because of a known IP, and people would be interested to tune in. But the question is, will they tune in for the rest of the year? For all the episodes for season 1, and obviously you want to milk it for several seasons, and there were news or reports that they're going to do several seasons, maybe even 5 seasons. But in terms of the story arc, I don't know how they're going to do that. If they don't get the attention of the audience in the first year alone, then they can't even bother considering going to season 2 and beyond. And it's a case for this show that it's too big to fail, in a sense here. According to the said article here, in businessinsider.com, it mentions that the $1 billion Lord of the Rings series will determine the company's streaming future. Okay? And if we can make it successful, why Amazon Studios is even here. Now, I don't think it will be their demise for if it's a failure. And again, it always goes back to the very basic concept. If you're trying to capture a wide audience or retain their viewership, then you want to make sure that the content is very compelling. Similar how Game of Thrones initially came to be. The first 7 seasons, not the last season. So having that engagement, do justice. But obviously you have to have a source material and not a crappy screenwriter or what they think the story should be all about. And the fact that the lore in Tolkien's universe is already set in stone. So trying to subvert or change it to your narrative and current societal issues is missing the point here. And obviously the companies has the option to do whatever they want, but also there are always consequences in their choices here. And whether it succeeds or not, well, only time can tell. So I think they've already aired the first 2 or 3 episodes, I think. And I've been watching, if you're familiar with the YouTube channel of Angry Joe Show, where they review the content and give their best opinion, trying to be objective. Obviously, you want every show to succeed, right? But the problem is, in terms of their narrative, storytelling. The main protagonist, in this case, the main character, Galadriel, if her story checks out, if it's believable in itself, the fact that it's science fiction, obviously there has to be some semblance of believability. Otherwise, if you suspend too much of a belief, then it's not believable enough, and or not believable anymore, or you're not able to immerse yourself in the world that the character is playing in, and what type of world, in terms of the elves character, the dwarves, the orcs, who are the enemies here, and so forth. So reading in the article here, let's see here. So Amazon is facing a moment of truth as it braces its premiere, the $1 billion TV show here, Rings of Power, as mentioned. So according to Tolkien, the company has not yet closed its fingers, Gollum-like, around its precious major water cooler show to lure global viewers en masse. Now, obviously, Amazon is not one of the top streaming services in the world, but they have a big network in terms of their Amazon Prime subscribers, so they can use that to leverage their video content here. But obviously, creating content is totally different than offering products and delivering to your doorsteps is another here. But it doesn't, it's not bad to have that initial network to begin with. And question here is, will they succeed? Now, according to Rich Greenfield, according to the analyst, there's no doubt that Amazon has had success. Yes, and I think one of the main success that they had is the TV series Jack Reacher, a known franchise which actually Tom Cruise was able to star in I think 2 films, which obviously didn't make sense if you were to read the book itself and look, or the description of what Jack Reacher should look like. The one in the TV show looks approximate close to, he is a very behemoth, very imposing person, rather than who Tom Cruise was. But that's a different discussion altogether. So again, TV shows, there are some hits, there are some flops here, but the question here is, trying to gain an attention, you have to consistently produce high quality content one after another, similar to how TV networks works. Obviously, you're trying to gain subscribership, provide advertising ads to generate income, revenue for the company, and the cycle continues here. It's not just about spending hundreds of millions of dollars and thinking that people will watch it. If the content is terrible, just take a look at many of the superhero films lately, with the exception of maybe Spider-Man No Way Home. Majority of the films wasn't able to reach its expectation. Even taking a look at the MCU films such as what do you call this, Doctor Strange Multiverse, and even Thor Love and Thunder didn't reach its peaks that one would expect, reaching beyond $1 billion here. So which means that they haven't been hitting the right mark since after Avengers Endgame a few years back. Anyway, let's continue reading on the article here. So Amazon has given Hollywood something to talk about, which is good, creating a lot of hype. But no single television has ever cost as much. So investing, as mentioned, $250 million to secure the rights to be able to produce the content is pretty significant here. And and what's interesting here, the studio has spent in the words of $500 million to produce it in New Zealand, and add the tens of millions of dollars in marketing, promotions, and global marketing and in events. You can safely say that it's going to cost them close to $1 billion here, and that's for just the first season alone. So obviously, with the high investment, you expect a high return as well. But at the end of the day, no matter how beautiful or the aesthetics is in terms of promoting, the marketing is, it always boils down to the content. If the content doesn't follow through to its origin source, and those people who have read the book, follow the stories, you're going to piss off that particular audience already. Now, if you're going to capture a different segment, people who have not watched or have read the books, or haven't watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is that's a big demographic also, then you're setting up yourselves to fail here. And what's interesting here is there are plans that to produce more seasons, 4 more seasons after the first one. So there has been high expectation here. But the question here is, what if it misses the mark here, or if it fails, or if it flops, which is it's looking likely more than than Showbiz Tidbit here, comparing the performance of the Game of Thrones versus the Rings of Power. The studio may face an existential crisis here. That the reason why it's going to succeed is because the executives at Amazon needed to succeed. So, well, you're caught in a rock or on a hard place, that to think that you need it to succeed rather than doing something to ensure its success, meaning, having the best actors in your TV show, having the best director, the best writer, best technical people to reproduce the aesthetics as mentioned, and everything else, since you've spent already a lot of money in getting the rights of the show. So, it's kind of half-assed if you think about it, spending on some parts top dollars, but on others, like the screenwriters, did they get the best people for the job? Do they have expertise in terms of Tolkien stories, of how Tolkien narrates the stories, or the expectation of how the story should be explained and told in the public audience here? Especially, obviously, the book narrative is different from movie narrative, as well as a series where it's episodal, so it has to be, you have more time to elaborate the story arcs, the character origins of many characters here, and obviously you're going to have plenty of characters here. And one would think that Gandalf would be a prominent character here, but that's another case here. But the question here is, did they put themselves in jeopardy by mishandling it? Only time can tell. And obviously, this would dovetail to the overall performance of the streaming services, which is Amazon Video here. And for me, I was curious to watch their content, but one of the main contents that I was interested only is about the car show, the Grand Tour. But the main three protagonists there are in their later stages, and not at the height that when they were still the host of the Top Gear series. But other than that, there's no interest for me to watch their, or to stay in their streaming services here. That may be different from other people, but for my case, I tend to stick to either, to my Netflix subscription more so than not. The question here is, how do you engage them? Is it just one show that's going to entice you to stay in the platform? Obviously, it's going to take a lot more. It's not just a catalog of films, which they've already acquired some of the studios, like in the case of MGM, which has the James Bond series. But for moving forward, you have to either acquire more studios, which is going to be costly, or create shows that's going to be compelling for many viewers or streaming aficionados here. So we'll see how the company fares here. And obviously, it's a very competitive, very cutthroat industry. And no matter what agendas do you want to push, at the end of the day, if the product is not of high quality, then the majority will not support your content, and it will not flourish. And the fact that in the case of Jack Reacher, it's not high budgeted, but the story is compelling, so I watch it from start to finish, then that's a good show. Question is, can you replicate it? Now I'm looking forward for the second season for the Jack Reacher. So do I have to subscribe for the entire year, a yearly basis? Not necessarily. Maybe I just need to subscribe on a particular month if they've already released the next season here. And if they want me to maintain that subscription, then they need to produce more films or more TV shows or TV series like this one. And it's not only Amazon who has this particular problem, but also other streaming services, Disney Plus, and even Netflix as well. So they're not alone here. So there's always a way to solve this, but the question is, will they do justice for the movie aficionados here? So I'll keep you updated with regards to the situation. So let's continue. For next topic here in terms of finance, in particular cryptocurrency, meaning what was interesting, I don't know if you've heard this in the news earlier. A woman was mistakenly sent a large sums of money through uh, crypto.com in the north of $7.1 million, which at the time I didn't seem very interesting, so I didn't discuss it that much. But what was interesting here is obviously if you're the company crypto, you want to get that money back. What's interesting in this issue, so if you were to look at techtimes.com, they went to court and sued the woman so that she could return that amount of money. And sad to say for that particular woman, the judge ruled in the favor of the company. Obviously, it's their money, and sued and tried to get additional 10% of interest, which is, I don't think that's fair, because in the first place it wasn't the woman's fault for being sent that amount of money. Now what she used for that money is another matter. And in this article, I think it was mentioned that she used that money to she used all of those money to purchase I think different aspects. I think bought a house on that aspect. So it mentioned here, that's right, the woman received 7.1 million instead of the 60 million, $68. So obviously that's a lot of zeros, discrepancies, that what was initially supposed to be returned in terms of how much she actually got. And the point here, it's not her fault, but the question is what she did with that amount is the question here. So the interesting part here is that the person reportedly spent the amount, 1.3 million EU, is that Australian dollars? I'm not sure. On a property here. So do you blame the person for using that money, just like winning a jackpot? Sorry, jackpot, and was able to get a windfall of money here. And obviously, that's not fair for the company, but they are at fault here. The fact that the court is asking the individual to pay even the interest, because obviously the crypto, in the cryptocurrency, it's not like just the bank that you're holding the money here. It's just valued at a Bitcoin in itself, and then you sell it off to be able to sell it, in terms of whatever currency that you're using it for, in this case Australian dollars. And what's interesting here, even the company tried several ways to freeze the account of the individual. And what's interesting here, it mentioned although crypto transactions are not designed to be reversible, centralized platforms function in a different way and can theoretically get payments reversed in case of either error or fraud. But the point here is, how come there's fraud transactions in the first place? So meaning they haven't fully uh, ensured that the system is foolproof of human error, so to speak. Meaning there's no redundancies to double check if what the transaction has transpired is actually what's supposed to happen, and they didn't check it. And what's interesting, it didn't just happen the day after, and then they found out right away that the transaction occurred. As mentioned, it took several months, which is a big uh, big no-no for a company that that's supposed to be dealing with large sums of money here. And the fact that that you let this thing happen for a few months, and obviously if you're the one who's on the receiving end, would think that, oh, maybe it's my lucky day, and then all of a sudden you're going to court, and then you're having to pay a substantial amount with interest. And that complicates the matter here. Now, whether you agree or not with what the company did, if you were the person receiving end, should you have used that money, or was it, blame it for incompetence in the company for letting this situation happen in the first place, and not being able to detect it right away, which is a two-step process of failure in a company here. The fact that you're using technology and you can even keep track of your transactions here properly. So better hire a more capable individual to do the job done. But that's for another discussion here. Anyway, For our next topic, what was it? Yes. So another issue, a court battle with regards to Apple, the company, in terms of their App Store platform. Now, uh, I'm sure many of you familiar. If you need a particular service or an application, obviously a company has to develop it, right? Whether it's for iOS or even for Android. So let's say you need a map, you can use Google Map or a different app for iOS, and then you can download it. Now some of it is for you have to pay for it, has monetary benefits for the company, so they try to leverage it. But if you produce an app, any app, the company, or in this case the owner of the platform, which is Apple, wants a cut of your revenue, the price of doing business, so to speak. I think they charge 30%, which has been the hot issue, not just for the gaming industry, but for a lot of the developers here, because obviously, what is the money used for? Is it to enhance the position of Apple, or to protect the consumers, the users, the developers who uses the app, and the company itself, right? And one would think that would be the three cases here, but that's not the case here. Ever more prominent is the issue of fraudulent applications, which, how is it that a multi-billion company that has so much resources is not able to identify, quell, squash, and stop or eliminate those uh, you know fraudulent parties, as we mentioned? But that's not the case here, and obviously the company, or the actual app themselves, the company that wants to do, what do you call this, the company that is not doing any fraudulent activities is the one's going to be hurt here. And in this case, that one of the company has sued Apple because of their app was hacked, in a sense, replicated by other fraudulent parties to entice other customers to use their app and pay money, and be hacked. So obviously it doesn't do well for those companies with who originally developed the platform here. And where's the protection from the platform holder, which is kind of interesting, that the platform wants to control the platform itself, which is true, and you ask for a fee, yet you cannot protect the interests of different parties here. So let's take a closer look here. So Apple settles the lawsuit with the developer over App Store rejections and scams. And dealing with the company is very difficult, not just with the scams as mentioned, but also applying for to be able to launch your app in the platform. You have to deal with a lot of BS and different policies that's not clear cut. There are favoritisms, preferential treatment, which is kind of confusing. And obviously, that's why having monopoly in a particular market is never good for the consumer, because it doesn't give us a lot of choice if we don't know who are the available parties. And obviously Apple gets to dictate the terms, but at what cost? And obviously we're willing to pay for a premium service if they are able to do their job. So let's take a closer look here. So it mentions here an app developer lawsuit over App Store rejections, scams, fraud has ended in a settlement agreement after the court filing showed a request to dismiss in the suit earlier this summer. Obviously, for Apple, they want to get this settled with behind the scenes so that there's no more issue. Obviously, it doesn't do well in their public image here. Now, according to the plaintiff, it mentions here that the app developer and former Pinterest engineer Costa Eleftheriou has made a name for himself in recent months, calling out some of Apple's most egregious app store scams. So scam is pretty prominent, so not just in the iOS but also in Android store, which culminated in the lawsuit as mentioned. So it mentions way back in 2021 that he alleged his own app had been unfairly rejected from the App Store and then later targeted by scammers, leading to loss of revenues. And obviously, are there any repercussions for the company? There has to be a severe penalty for a company such as big as Apple, that you get to dictate the terms, but you don't come through or follow through with what your promise is. It used to be that way back when Steve Jobs was still alive. He was promoting that the interoperability of instant messaging from iOS going to Android here, but they locked it in so that you'll be stuck in that platform forever, which is to their benefit. But what they say and what they preach is totally two different aspects here. And as we read on, the case has been a high-profile example of developer discontent. So it's not just the users that it's being affected; it's the developer themselves who's been affected of lost revenue. Here, you ask them to pay a fee, and then you don't protect their interests here, which is my main pet peeve here. So it mentions many developers has become dissatisfied not only with the requirement to pay the app commission on their own sales, and then something Epic Games, which we have been mentioning earlier, but also how the App Store model itself by incentivizing scammers to rip off and profit from a legitimate developer's work, which is, I think, the main issue here. So if you're trying to drive away the legit developers, then if they stop making legit apps, then what's left is fraudulent app in your platform, which is not good in a sense. So is there a way to eliminate those scams? I think the filtering system should be foolproof. It's not for every one legit, there are 5, 10, or even more fraudulent apps of the same breadth. That's why it's difficult for me as a user to identify which one would you consider is reliable. And there's no checklist. The fact that it has a rating is not an indicator. It only tells you the experience of the users. But in terms of if it's approved by the platform, the fact it's in the platform, is it technically approved? Or is there a way to measure it similar to how Twitter verifies the account, or even in YouTube, they verify if you're going to be copyrighted strike, if there's a way to be able to verify the authenticity and so forth. So there's a lot of issues that needs to be addressed, and for as big as company as Apple, they're doing a terrible job in providing a service, which is what they're supposed to be doing. Now the Mr. Costa mentions that his complaint alleged that not only Apple rejected his Flick type Apple Watch keyboard app, it then approved a competitor keyboard apps and others that use an integrated version of Flick type keyboard to publish in the App Store. So how about copyright here? And so forth. So this seemingly contradicted Apple's claim that the Flick type keyboard offered a poor user experience, given that Apple's own app review team was greenlighting the technology. So again, what they're saying and doing are always complete opposites. So it's hard to identify, especially if you're trying to do business with them, if you're a developer here. So saying like this is kind of confusing, and there has to be a way to better communicate with your developers here. And as I mentioned, I think that's why charging 30% may be a bit high, and if more and more developers rise up, I think can cause a lot of ruckus that can significantly impact the bottom line of Apple here. Sad to say, they have already said that, which is good for the company but bad for other developers, because that's his case here, which was made prominent. But if you're not as prominent as here in this situation, then your voice will be go to nowhere, and you will not be taken care of, and we're left in the dust here, which is a sad thing here. And hopefully more people would voice up, and it just goes to show, obviously, if you notice, these issues tends to prop up in tech related products or services. Namely, obviously, you have the Apple App Stores, the Google Play Store, and then even vendors, e-commerce giants such as Amazon here. And having monopoly or dominance in a particular market is never good for the consumers as a whole, because you're left with no options. So if you're a developer, what else are you supposed to do? Either you stick with Apple, you want to play with Apple's rules, or play with Android's or Google's rules, will be difficult in a sense here. So we'll wait and see what happens there as well. Anyway, sticking to gaming, as I mentioned, the advent of free-to-play games hasn't been a new concept per se, but a lot of companies has been leveraging it so that they can monetize it by offering free-to-play. What do you call this? Incentivizing your game by purchasing free. What do you call this? Play to win scenarios. So technically, a free-to-play game is not necessarily free. And as we mentioned in previous videos regarding talking about how terrible the game Diablo Immortal is, and obviously other companies are taking a look at this business model that could be lucrative, and they're going to capitalize it. If it's going to be prominent and people are still going to pay a large sums of money, it incentivizes the company to even push their agenda even further. Take a look at EA, which is very, very prominent in their sports titles. That's why I'm surprised that Madden's terrible game and trying to entice you to buy purchase packs, which is not necessary. And obviously, if it's target for adults, that's a different choice. But obviously, kids can play this. And where do kids get their money? Obviously, from their parents. And then you have FIFA is another scummy. The Team Ultimate Packs is another crummy, technique to entice gamers, kids at that, to spend in the upwards of tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars that EA makes a lot of money. It's not the game that makes them a lot. The fact that they charge $60 to $70 and then they give their special edition with additional items so that you have to pay or pony up an extra few dollars here and there, but I've stopped patronizing that game a long time ago already. But anyway, going back to the article here. So according to TheVerge.com, so the ticking time bomb that is modern free-to-play games. Now, obviously, what used to be paying for a full version of a game was interesting, but obviously offering free-to-play, which it's heavily not necessarily monetized, but heavily full of adverts makes sense, right? But the question is, they're trying to see what's the limit that a consumer or gamer is willing to tolerate here, which is we're getting to see the extremes here from where they started. They've been pushing the boundary slowly but surely to where it's becoming more concerning if you think about it. And obviously, I don't play a lot of free-to-play games. I've tried some of it, and obviously, I'm not the majority here. Maybe I'm just in the minority here. And the question here is, what happens to the older games that it's not available anymore? So companies can create free-to-play games and monetize it and even earn a larger sums of money here. And is that good for the industry? I think it was mentioned in other channels and articles that with the way the gaming industry has been pushing this monetization, free-to-play, and then pay-to-win scenarios, I think it's going to come to a point that gamers are going to be fed up and they will not support the platform anymore, whether you're in mobile or even in big platforms such as PlayStation, Xbox, or even Nintendo. And people would stop playing games, purchasing your games. The fact that they're pushing for digital games is another way for them to generate more money, because it doesn't make them it doesn't cost them a lot of money to sell you the software. And the interesting here, as Nintendo has shown in the past, that once it's been in the market for several years, or let's say gets to a decade, will they sustain it, continue supporting that platform? Obviously, more newer generations of the console or iterations will be implemented by then. And what happens to the old titles? So if you did not download it, or if you deleted it, because obviously who would download your entire catalog digital games if you don't have the storage to hold it? So you might think you can delete, maybe you can download it later. But the sad fact is, if they were to stop continuing providing the server services so that you can download it in the future, which, sad to say, Nintendo has already stopped doing that for, I think it's the Nintendo Wii Shop. So what will happen to the games that you want to play here? So you'll be left with no choice. That's why the issue of what do you call this? The issue of Nintendo trying to remaster the game. Why not just offer it in their Switch Online games as a free service? Because it's an old game. So why trying to repackage it as a new game, but it's still an old game in per se? But the sad fact, people still buy it, which is kind of concerning. Anyway, going back to the article here. So it was mentioned here, Dragalia launched way back in 2018 a statement of intent, according to the Nintendo, in partnership with Japanese developer Cygames. Now, Nintendo may have first jumped into the field of mobile games back in 2016 with the launch of games like Super Mario Run and Mitomo, but this is the first original property the company had produced exclusively for mobile devices. Now, this free-to-play gacha game, a game whose content is generally free to access while charging microtransactions. So even Nintendo is jumping the bandwagon. And I think one of the games that they try to use, obviously one of their main IPs is Mario. I forgot what's the name of the title that they tried to do the same things here, a free to play, and then they try to capitalize on the microtransactions, which sad to say didn't work out. So they tried to lower the cost. Well, by then, if the audience didn't like what you're offering and the fee is exorbitant, they'll go on to another game. That's the choice. I think that's very important that everyone needs to understand. So obviously they'll keep on trying. It's incumbent upon us to let them know that we don't want these types of game. We want a fully formed game, similar to how Elden Ring is, right? From start to finish, no microtransactions needed, DLCs galore. We want more content rather than more fees that we have to pay for a particular game, which is, I kind of miss it. Looking back now from games 10, 20 years in the past. Anyway, continuing. So it mentions here that less than a year of after launch, the game has already earned over 100 million, which tells you there is a big market for free to play using this type of microtransaction now. And it always goes back to the main issue: is microtransaction considered illegal, and is it considered gambling? And I think until governments define this microtransaction, is it a legal activity or not, and until it gets settled, they're going to take advantage here. And other countries have already stated that microtransactions, their style of how they entice people to play or to pony up large sums of money is akin to gambling, right? When you pay for something, like in the case of Diablo Immortal, right, to get those high valued items to upgrade your characters, and you pay for $25, I think, so you can hope to get it, and you don't even know what's the probability. So is it 90% chance, 40, 50, 30? I'm assuming it's less than 1%. If it's less than 1%, what are the chances of you winning it? So for every time that you pay, is it going to be as successful compared if you were to go to a casino? Again, there's no standardized metric here, and which is kind of concerning, so that the company, the publisher, can just dictate whatever amount is. If they want to make it more difficult, so obviously they'll make it less than 0.0000001% of you winning or getting the ideal one. So meaning they're asking you to spend more and even more. That's why, in the cases of Diablo Immortal, someone has already spent $100,000. Think about that and see if it's a worth it. The fact that you spend more than $70 for a particular game, I think it's kind of crazy, because that's how much I'm willing to pay. If the retail price for an actual game, why not pay for that game and find out if it's a worthwhile endeavor rather than spend beyond that. But that's a different tactic that companies now know that it's possible, and they're keep on continue leveraging that as well here. And until governments, changes their policy or consider this as a gambling activity, then we'll continue to hear more companies be more emboldened to promote free-to-play games here. And obviously it's going to get worse, especially for kids. To whom are they targeting here? And it's not as if they're offering tremendous value for the game. If it's a value game like League of Legends, right, then it's a totally different matter. So that if you want to upgrade aesthetics wise, it should be an option rather than a requirement. So if you want to upgrade your characters by grinding it out, playing the games longer times, then it's okay, right? The more time that you spend, you should be rewarded, not the other way around. Meaning that the pay to win scenario is kind of crummy if you think about it. And that's my opinion anyhow. And the question is, how long is it going to persist here? And I think it's going to continue and persist for a very long time until users or the community, says, I think this is enough. And for me, I think it's a long time coming. It should have been front and center, a few years back, and now it's getting even worse. Obviously, looking at different publishers and the other developers will be enticed. I think to make money here, we need to create more free-to-play game here so that we can nickel and dime people here from spending, getting the bigger whales, obviously, so to speak. Yeah. Anyway, whether you agree or not, but I think it's going to be a continuing issue moving forward. Hopefully, it can be rectified, but not necessarily in the immediate future, which is kind of disappointing. Anyway, for our last story here on a Songbird, as I mentioned earlier, now we've talked about, as of this recording, you may have noticed the news around the world has been popping about is the sad news. Actually, if you've heard in the past few days that the Queen Elizabeth II has been ill, and sad to say that today, as of this recording, it's been officially mentioned that the Queen has died. And let's see, what was her age? Queen. So how old was she? The heck was it? How old was the Queen? All right. Wait here. She was born. No, her reign. Ah, yes. So she was born in 1926, but she started her reign only in the mid 1950s, 1952, and obviously it ended in September 8th. So that's 9 in Pacific. It's here in the Asia Pacific, 2022. So she preceded her dad, George the Sixth, which if you have watched, what was that film with Colin Firth? Crap, I forgot. Colin Firth film. The King's Speech. That's right. So even though it's a sad news that the Queen has already passed, but let's have a look back of how her presence impacted our culture here. And according to CNBC, she's been prominent in a lot of our social media, and not just in the social media, but in the news, in movies, worldwide. And obviously, she has spanned across several decades. And what's interesting is her connection to a lot of interesting events in the past. Obviously, the most recent one is the pandemic. And before that, you have the financial crisis that hit the United States. You have the bubble crash, the war in Iraq, and so that's predates the year 2000. And then earlier than that, so when I was still young, you have the different wars before I was even born, from the World War II all the way to the Korean War, and the Cold War in between. She has seen all of it. Now, obviously, her reign only started when she succeeded her dad, King George VI, as mentioned earlier, which, if you were not familiar, you could watch the film to give you a bird's eye view of what it's like to be part of the royal. Now, obviously, it's not just that particular film that showcases the royal family, but there are also other TV shows where other actresses played the queen's role very remarkable. I think who was the other? I think we'll discuss it in a little bit here. But what's interesting here is, even though she's the queen of the United Kingdom, not necessarily she has a lot of power or sway. She has power, but she doesn't control the government per se. Obviously, you have parliament to do that, but I think it's more of a symbolism compared to centuries in the past here, where king or queen rule the nations and make decisions for the entire nation. But obviously that has changed in the last century or so. So meaning they're more on symbols that represents how a country is prospering here. And as mentioned in the past, that she has been ruling the monarch, or the English monarch, for the past 7 decades here, and that's pretty remarkable here. And obviously, what's interesting is her son, Prince Charles, is in line to take the throne, and then Prince Charles' son, or uh, Prince Charles' eldest son, Prince William, yes, the eldest, will be in line as well. So, how long will be the next reign for Prince Charles? We'll have to wait and see. So, but for today, we'll focus on 8 depictions according to CNBC.com regarding how her presence has impacted our pop culture here. So it's very interesting. So, even though it's a sad news, but you always go to retrospect, look at, I may not know her personally, but I felt her in the news, obviously with the royal weddings in the past, how she was involved, and obviously with the controversial issues with with her kids, our grandchild, and so forth. So we'll take a look on how she has reached a lot of people's life, whether we knew it or not. Anyway, so to top it off, so let's take a look. So let's see here. So the first one is the TV series of The Queen here. So I'm not familiar here, but as mentioned here in this article, Helen Mirren won an Academy for her portrayal of the Queen Elizabeth in Stephen Frears' 2006 film. So I might be checking that out, which won Best Picture here. So obviously, a lot of actresses has tried to play the titular role, whether at a younger age or at her prime, or at a latter stage, would be interesting. So creating a film from a young age all the way to where she died, obviously plenty of people would be doing that, or studios or films would try to do that, but obviously not as of the moment, but sometime in the near future, to showcase her experience, her viewpoint, obviously through the eyes of the people that is closest to her. And let's see what else. Next we have Minions. So this one I've watched. So it was pretty funny that the royal would allow an animated film to showcase her in a different light. Obviously, being in a monarch, it has to be prim and proper, very professional, very serious. So very rarely do you see them in being relaxed, so to speak, especially in public eye. So seeing her in a different aspect, different persona. Obviously, this is a kids movie, a very unrealistic at that, but nonetheless, it's very interesting how the queen is playing a large role. Obviously, the role is somewhat a supporting role, necessarily a leading role, but nonetheless, it's part of our culture. We know that the queen, for the longest time that I've been alive here, that the queen has been part of my life for so long. Obviously, I've never been to the UK. Hopefully, I could visit their country in the future. Visiting Buckingham Palace, where she resides, knowing a lot of people, very powerful, popular celebrities like Stephen Fry, who have told a lot of stories of how she dealt with the Queen, and parties that was held in her behalf, and so forth. So it's pretty interesting. So I've watched this film. It's very enjoyable. So I do strongly recommend checking it out with your kids here. Next, another popular one. So obviously this one, it goes back to her younger days when her dad took the mantle from his dad in the film The King's Speech. It's a very interesting narrative here of how the struggles of the Queen's struggle of his dad being named when his brother abdicated, so that he was the eventual successor, and had to lead their troops during crisis during World War II at that time. So it's a very pivotal time at that time when she was still young. And the film obviously won Oscars, Best Picture, and I think it won Best Actor for Colin Firth here. So I strongly recommend everyone to watch this particular film as well. Now for this one, the Paddington Shorts film, I haven't watched it. So again, you can see her, being active. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of studios or people who wants to create content wants to incorporate a storyline if it makes sense to include the queen, and obviously the queen has the right to agree or to disagree in, to show in many aspects, and she does not often show herself in public spectrum in terms of, uh, pop culture in a sense. So I'll be checking this out later on. So what else? So this was only recently, early this year, I think. So to celebrate her platinum jubilee. Now another one is Spencer. So this focuses more on the story of Lady Diana, or the former Princess Diana, the father, sorry, the father of Prince William, and the former husband of who will be the new king, Prince Charles here. So obviously it portrays or focuses the central role of the princess here. Obviously part of the narrative here is the royal family, which obviously the queen is always part of that story, always, in the monarch here. Another one is, one of my favorites were in, during the 2012 London Olympics, which is obviously if you're given a choice, you want to showcase your country, your city, and who else to promote it but the queen herself. And in this case, parodying the James Bond theme with Daniel Craig playing the titular role of James Bond here. And obviously the introduction is very, very exciting and very, very compelling here of how the Queen and James Bond will work together here in this case. So I do strongly suggest watching this again. And what's interesting, the Queen has already surfaced in years past or decades past, all the way in 1988. So I'm still a young pup then, and she was showcased in a particular film, not necessarily herself, but a representation of herself. So where the Queen visited the United States to watch a baseball game in the film The Naked Gun, which was popularized by Leslie Nielsen, who already sadly passed away, another great comedian. So it's another, homage to how popular the Queen is, that, in Europe, in the United States, or different parts of the world, they'd like to always find ways to incorporate a storyline for the Queen themselves. And then you have the current TV series that's being showcased in Netflix, which I haven't watched. The Crown, wherein several characters plays the titular character of the Queen Elizabeth II here. So it portrays different aspects, different years, different decades, obviously. So you have actresses such as Claire Foy, Olivia Colman, and Imelda Stanton. I'm not sure who played her character. So obviously she's very interesting because she has lived a very long life, hopefully a meaningful, productive life, so that because she has impacted obviously not just the lives of her citizens in the United Kingdom, but in some shape or form obviously has shown what women power would look like. And you don't have to be king to be powerful. Case in point, to be queen is as powerful as a king as well. So the fact that she has lived so long and showcase what a queen can and cannot do, has its privileges. Obviously, making a lot of money, having a lot of privileges is good, but obviously you have a lot of responsibilities, not just to yourself, to your family, but as well as to your citizen as well. And being the symbol of what a great nation should look like. And I think she has represented her country very, very well. And, the citizens there could be very proud. She may not be perfect. Obviously, not all of us can be perfect. But nonetheless, she's the epitome of what a great monarch should look like, flaws and all. And I think condolence to the family, but I think we should celebrate her life rather than focus more on her passing as well. But anyway, I think that concludes our discussion here. So, not on a somber note, but I think And if you look at the perspective here, her contribution is, I think, pretty remarkable here. And I think around the world, people know who the queen is. When you say Queen Elizabeth, they know just one queen. That's the Queen of the United Kingdom here. Anyway, that concludes our discussion for this week. Let's take a look if we have any. Yes, it's hard to replace the queen. So we have some comments here. Yeah, it's hard to replace the queen's popularity. And the popularity, it's a symbol. That's the thing. I wish our country had that symbol. We used to have that, but that's what way before our time, when our country was colonized, and our symbolism of freedom obviously is Jose Rizal, but we need a new version of Jose Rizal for our current iteration here, because for our country to succeed, we need a symbol that would reflect the best of all of us. And I think the queen has done justice for her people, and I think it's a good reflection that I'm sure there are a lot more positive comments on her rather than negatives here. And obviously, it would be unfair to talk about those things at this current stage, but that's for a future discussion here. Anyway, that's about it. So hopefully you've enjoyed our discussion. We've expended more time than necessary, but if it's an interesting topic, I tend to blur or blubber some more here. Hopefully it was interesting to you, and if you have any interesting opinions, also leave your comments down below, or if you want to check out the full article, I will post it in the link in the description below. As always, I'll see you in the next one. So same bad time hopefully, and bad channel here. Or you could check out my other videos. So we have interesting topics on business update every Wednesdays. Another is on every Mondays. I have Monday checklist, so I talk about other stuffs as well. So might be interesting to you. So if you find this enjoyable, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you enjoyed the content, feel free to share the content to a wider audience here. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.